Hey everyone, welcome in to episode 2 of the Public Land Savages podcast. Today we are talking turkeys. Most of us here aren't that very well experienced with turkeys, so this episode's going to be featuring our resident turkey expert, Justin. We're going to touch on some scouting, some gear setups, setting up in the woods. What am I looking at?
That's me in my bedroom practicing for turkey season. Hey, all right. I told you, it looks like Casper. It's winter. It's been winter. Like, it's only spring now.
Oh, man. All right, let's start this fresh again. We're going to touch on some scouting, some wildly inappropriate turkey dancing videos, turkey gear, setting up when you're actually in the woods, and how to call. So with that, let's turn it over to our turkey expert, Justin.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Spring gobbler is definitely one of my favorite seasons. This isn't my real spring gobbler. That's my first date attire. Can't get the whole face in there. First date.
Keep it up. It looks better.
But I know. Show me more dates I get in this thing. Even like the old Outback hat.
It might look good, but you sound terrible.
I usually unclip one side, but the headphones messing me up. No, I think one of the most important things I wanted to go over with turkey hunt today is don't overcall. Public land, especially, I see every spring. I mean, there's not a spring that goes by that I don't see guys just hammering calls, whether it's mouth calls or box calls.
What is this?
Looking a little bit like that. Just hammering them, and even when the birds are gobbling, there's no pause. There's no way. I mean, they're just hammering back. Sometimes you got to start slow. If the bird seems to be aggressive, then you can answer back with aggression. But you don't want to just be the aggressor in that situation. You want to urge him to come in. Make it curiosity almost that he has to come in to see if you're still there or not. You just want to be hammering in, because if you were that excited, the way I always think of it, if I was that excited as a hen, I'd be rushing into him, not him coming to me. So I try to keep calling sparsely until, I really feel like he's hammering. If he's gobbling and double gobbling and there's not much pauses in between, the bird will fold. I mean, I think, a lot of people avoid spring gobbler season because you think you need to be a pro caller, and that's just absolutely not true. What you need to do is just be smart about calling. You can absolutely use box calls. You can absolutely use slate calls. Mouth call is a good thing to learn. It's very versatile. It's hands-free. You can work other calls. A lot of times, sometimes I'll double call. If I have a group, they're really aggressive, I might purr with my little hand work call here. That's pretty terrible. Something like that as I'm calling with the mouth call at the same time. Just get a presence of more than one hen. But that's an aggressive situation again. I love the slate call for when you got a real quiet bird. A bird seems to be hanging up, calling sparingly. There's minutes that go by in between gobbles. And if you notice, when you call first, you get them to gobble, call again, get them to gobble. If you pause a little bit after on the third time, they'll start gobbling and try to gauge if they're moving towards you or not. Otherwise, you might have to get up and move. That's the other huge point about spring gobbler a lot of guys don't do is they're too stationary.
You think they're just afraid to move?
I think so. Everybody always says that, but I'd rather bust trying to sneak in on a bird than just sit there and call for 2 hours and nothing happens. You know what I mean? At least, it's busted. I got to move on. But, we've all been there. You sit there frustrated. He'll gobble way out then, but it becomes like 2 minutes apart, then 5 minutes apart, then maybe 10, 15 minutes apart between gobble. Like, he really wants you to come to him. So even if you close the gap, so to speak, and I mean, it is risky, but I think with your setup, you really, some guys just unload everything when they sit down. Like, that's why everybody has the turkey vest. It's not just a fashion statement, it's accessibility. You have your seat there, your pouch, all your call pockets are in the front, they're accessible, so you can just pick up and move. Essentially, the only thing you should be picking up is your gun and go. Leave your seat down if you're only going 100 or 200 yards. pack up. But I'd like to see more people out in the spring. I feel like it's just an underhunted season, especially in Pennsylvania. The past, I'd say, probably 10 years now. It's really declined. I mean, when we were kids, it was a big thing. I mean, you had to be careful calling birds because they gobbled too loud. Guys way down over the hill would hear them.
Oh yeah.
And now you're hunting with 20 dudes. That's exaggeration, but 4 or 5 guys. I've had guys that I've known come and scout birds from me. They know where I'm at, and they hear gobbles, and they just work their way over.
I don't have many memories of spring turkey as a kid, but I do know one time I was out with my dad and my grandpa, and we split up. My grandpa went with me, and my dad went around another ridge top, and apparently he lost track of direction and came sneaking into our calls thinking we were a bird, and he got about 40 yards away before he realized what was actually going on. So
that's the other.
That's what I was just gonna say.
It's dangerous out there. Yeah,
with talking about getting up and moving to close the gap, Justin, wouldn't you say that you'd want to close the gap, but you definitely don't want to be stalking that bird because you could be stalking up on another hunter?
Yeah, I mean, so most guys don't gobble. So typically, if you're stalking a gobble, you're in good shape. You shouldn't be stalking a hen call in spring gobbler. But Andrew, I got stories like that too. I mean, more than once I've had guys, either come sit right next to me or walk by and not even know. Like, it's a scary situation because every year somebody gets clipped, or even in the same hunting party, they get peppered, and it's just because that's why they do that, identify your target. That's one of those seasons I'm really kind of with and on board with the rules. There's a lot of over rules in a lot of the states with hunting, but especially with the orange requirements. We hunt in New York. There's barely any orange requirement. What is it? A hat when you have to wear it? I can't remember.
Hat and a vest, pretty much on the state lands, but
but
you're on
most of the time the guys we see guys in snow camo.
I should say state parks.
We see guys in snow camo out there. I mean, in the middle of gun. It's just, but yeah. So when you're stalking a gobble, that's kind of an easy thing to discern once you've done it more than a few times. Whether it's a guy or not, because the gobble tubes are pretty similar. You won't hear a quick double gobble. There's a lot of difficult things they can do. So a lot of times you can field judge, but you might not be the only guy stalking with them. Mm-hmm. And orange isn't going to hurt you. Like, turkeys aren't going to pick up a movement, like quick, fast movement, like predators have. You know what I mean? Like a fox, coyote, they're going to close the distance quickly. So they pick up on that quick movement. You don't have to be worried about like deer being as quiet with your steps. You can't be breaking every stick in the woods, but you can move. I mean, I've ran, on multiple occasions. I've crawled through blowdowns, just tearing and ripping. It's probably sound like a bear coming through there. And, I got to the top and they're still gobbling, still hanging out. Like, it's a lot easier to move in spring gobbler than any other season. Fall turkey's hard to move because, we could have 30 sets of eyes looking for you as well. In spring gobbler, 1 or 2 sets is what they're looking for, is the only thing you're looking for, not a whole flock you got to be worried about.
What about, sorry, go ahead.
Hard.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say it's hard.
I know for me, I've always struggled using like mouth calls. I gag on them. I don't know why it is. So for me, it's kind of always been one hesitation to actually get out there and try it. Just a lack of confidence in my abilities to call, I guess, more than anything.
I thought you and Doug were working on that.
That's a different type of mouth call.
Oh, I didn't know you had a gag reflex.
That was a wide open door there.
Yes, it was.
I could say more, but I'll just leave that where it's at.
I think mouth call, I mean, I started before I could drive, and I used to ride my bike around just hammering on mouth call. I mean, guys would yell at me saying, what are you saying? You sound like crap, or just talk crap while I'm riding through town. But you got to play and play and play. And it's
that's a normal occurrence in Sheffield. Some kid just riding through town making turkey calls.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like the elk call reads, the elk call mouth reads. You put one on my mouth, it's like, oh, God, this. And you watch the videos, and it's like, it's so easy. And they tell you how to do a deep growl at the end. I'm like, I don't even know how to remotely start to make that sound. So I just wouldn't get discouraged. Just keep making any noise. And, it's about tongue pressure. People
always
get too worried about call. Yeah, people get too worried about call positioning when, it's in your mouth. It sets in the roof of your mouth nicely. You push it up against there with your tongue. It's just more of the tongue position. But once you start making any kind of noise, you'll be able to direct what noise. And you try to start with one thing that you want to learn. Whether it's a cluck, yelps, whatever you want to start with. Master that, then work your way to the next call.
Kelsey,
you don't have to be perfect.
Would you say with the turkey mouth call, it's similar to the elk mouth call in the sense that you don't want to use the tip of your tongue, but a little bit farther back for that pressure?
I'd say they're not very similar at all as far as the tongue placement. I mean, the breathing's not, because the mouth call is almost a quick breath, when that elk call is that elongated, locator call is like the biggest one you ever hear. But, mouth call. I just press it against the roof of my mouth, and I move my tongue for the different types of calls. But you can explain it to your blue in the face. And like I said, it's one of those things you can watch YouTube videos. They make it look simple. They talk about the correct place to put your tongue, correct amount of air, how to make, shape your mouth. But I found it easier for me was just playing and playing and playing and playing and playing. It's hard this time of year to just pick one up and say I'm good to go. But you can also get a slate call. You can get one of the ones with 3 different materials, whether stone or glass or whatever. Scratch it up a little bit in a little spot. Research how to surface your slate call. At first I would get them and I just scratch the little crap out of them. And a lot of guys just like a little patch, a little kind of sweet spot on there, just scratch up a little bit one direction. When I used to, I was just scratching the whole thing as many directions as I get. It's easier when you ride it one direction, a small spot to control. But, there's nothing wrong. And you could do really well with soft calls. If I would try to do a locator call and I wasn't good with a mouth call, I'd go right to a box call. I mean, there's some guys that swear by, and there are differences in box calls. There are some. That's the one thing that quality might be the most important in is, a good wood box call. Because mouth calls, there's local companies, there's national, international companies. I haven't really found that I'm like, this is a terrible call. You can get them almost anywhere. Guys stretch rubber for put reeds in, make their own calls. I know a guy locally here at State College that does it. There's not really a bad mouth call, but box calls you can really get a crappy, And the one good thing about box calls, I think it's usually a raspy call, so that's usually your older hen call. So instead of the high pitched, he's smirking.
So if you got some gobblers and the old ladies, that's the one you want to go after then.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody wants them old, mature ladies when you're in the woods. It gets cold some nights. So you want them big mamas. You don't want them pretty young, skinny things.
Now, are we still talking about turkeys, or are we talking about cougars?
We're talking about winter cougars. You gotta get them biggins for the winter. They'll keep you warm. Oh God, it's the classic.
I knew one of you would say something like that. I was just waiting. I was like, I got a perfect one for this when they say it.
Yeah, I think in spring gobbler, my best part of it for me was always hunting with somebody. When you go solo, it's easy to pick up and move as much as you want, cover as much ground as you want, because somebody might hold you back. Somebody might want to go more or less. But when you're hunting with a buddy, you can do a stagger call setup where you put the shooter in front of the caller, because a lot of times, gobblers will come in, especially mature gobblers, they'll come in, and when they get in visual range or close enough, they think they'll start pacing back and forth, almost strut like, hey, I'm here, full strut, come get me. Like, they're not going to close that gap. And that's where calling talent comes in on some sort. And other guys will straight up go right into a crawl. Like, that's the other thing about turkey. Don't be afraid to crawl. Like, sometimes you really got to. I don't see you as much of a threat that low to the ground. I mean, if you're seeing, if you're fully seeing, you're in trouble. But you're not going to seem like as much a threat as you would if you're walking into them. So a lot of guys, especially field hunters, crawl, and they do it effectively, into gun range, because you have to close that gap somehow. once he hangs up, the likelihood he's coming in is pretty slim.
That was my next question. Are you mostly having success on like field edges, or are you in mature woods? Where are you finding most of these?
For us, public land, field edges aren't really available. I mean,
No.
Pennsylvania is not a great state for planting corn or whatever for public use or wildlife. So my experience is mostly big timber. I like steep hillsides. I love grapevine. Like if I see grapevine, I immediately stop and I'm going to check it out. I'm checking for sign. Sign, as we discussed before, sign doesn't work as well in the spring like it would in the fall with a big group of turkeys. They're causing a mess, scratching everywhere. You could pretty much walk the path. In spring, it's not so much, it's all vocal. So I stay on top of these steep hillsides. I usually try to stick around water source, like a creek or a river, but high above, stay on your tops, make your calls until, you get something sounds off. And it's usually, sometimes you get real lucky and it's bam, it's right on top of you and boom, you got a setup. Most of the time it's, 1 or 2 hills over. They get a thunder gobble. So from there, you got to look at your terrain and say, how can I get uphill on this bird? Because your best scenario is to be uphill, find good cover, good tree. That's the other thing about other hunters. You want to have something behind you. You want to be buried in. So all your visual range is the only thing you're exposed to. And, try to point yourself towards the turkey, get an open path coming in. You don't want to have big rock in front of you or a big thicket. Sometimes you can use that as your advantage. Like, I want to pull him this way. So set up on this side of the thicket, on one side or the other of the thicket, but use that as a natural, something that diverges the turkey your way, essentially. But that's mostly my start out point is, high ridges. I kind of walk a little bit into the tree line. I don't stay too much top so I can still see down over, still be heard from the tops on other tops. Look for grapevine and a water source and always try to set up uphill, even if you have to cover extra ground, like uphill versus downhill, you'll be way more successful. It's very difficult to call them downhill because, they're vulnerable when they're calling. So they putting themselves out there to predators too, like, hey, I'm over here. So they want to have that escape route. They're on the side of a hill or towards the top. Their escape routes, all they got to turn, take a few steps, and then glide for, hundreds of yards versus they have to try to fly uphill. They're in trouble. They're, too fat. They can't get up that quick. They can't fly that far from, just a straight up, but they can glide for a long ways like they're gone.
So you just running and gunning trying to find them mostly, or are you trying to roost birds and then get back there first thing at crack of dawn?
I mean, the most ideal thing is to put them to bed, to go out in the evening. I usually start about 6:30 this time of year. It's a little early, but, I got a bit of a drive. And my favorite way to scout, I just drive dirt roads. I stop every so often, let out. I usually start with an owl call. Use the owl call, nothing, especially earlier. Right towards dark, the owl call usually works particularly well. First thing in the morning as well. When they're in the trees, they're super vocal because they're safe. They're up out of predators' range. So they're really, they'll gobble at a car door. I've heard them gobble at sirens from ambulances and, anything you can think of, they'll gobble at when they're in the tree and safe. So that's why locating the night before is a great thing. You just drive around as much as you can. You hear a bird, mark the area, use Onyx, as we discussed with the elk. Onyx is a great tool. Mark, hey, heard birds here, downhill, mental note of that, or uphill, or whatever side of the road they're on. But then move on. Don't overcall them. Don't get them used to your talking. Because towards the end of the season, they get a lot of stage fright because they're so used to guys calling and calling and calling. So they really aren't as vocal. They'll come in dead silent. But putting them to bed is your highest percentage of success. Is go out the night before, find a couple gobbling in trees, work your way around, don't stop till dark, and then find your best plan to set up on them first thing in the morning. You got to get in there for daylight. You got to get set up, try to be uphill.
What time? What time do you like to get in?
Oh, man.
Like an hour before sunrise?
Full dark, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you want to be set up full dark because as soon as it starts breaking where they can visually see, that's coming down time.
And they'll see the shadows and silhouettes if you're cresting hills.
I mean, I use flashlights going in. I'm crunching. Like, I'm not being extra careful. I'm not being overly loud either. I'm not running or anything. But, you don't have to be as cautious as you would for deer season. Just get in there, get set up. I get my decoy out and everything because almost always they fly away from you. So when they come down of a tree, if you feel like the calls are further away, that's not necessarily a bad thing. He's not moving away from you. He might have come down off the tree. A lot of guys in those situations will get close. They want to get within 200 yards, maybe even less than that, because they will use their hat, beat their hat off a tree or their leg, act like its wings flapping, coming down, signaling I'm a hen. I just flew down out of the tree. And I'm going to call some more. They almost always fly away from you first, out of the tree, and then work their way back to you. And if you're ever in a thicket, you got to be cautious. They make some unusual drumming noises, with their chest. It's like a deep drum grumble. It's like the elk roar. It's something you wouldn't think they would make, but it's more of a pounding drum. I've heard that more times than I've heard them run in, just gobbling their heads off. You'll hear like a drumming, and it's coming from their chest almost.
A drumming like a monkey pounding on his chest, or what are we talking here?
Yeah. It's like a thunder drum. You just hear, I can't even mimic it. It's something you could YouTube, very easily. It's just a deep bass drum. Like it's like their, most animals have their like close quarters call.
Yeah.
Like a drum.
It's a drum?
Yeah, it's one of those drums. Dude, I cut your joke off. I saw that one coming a mile away.
And you play different drums than I've ever seen.
No, yeah, it's just beware. If you hear something out of the ordinary, it might not just be, especially if it's not peak daylight, you're not going to get that thunder gobble all the way in. That's where you get a lot of peak daylight. But if it's still breaking daylight, you'll hear unusual. You might hear a little bit of purring and a little bit of drumming. That's when you really got to be set up, and you got to wait for that moment. They almost always peek their head up just enough to see. They don't do their body, and they will scout out and check for any movement. So it's really important to stay still. That's what's tough hunting with kids, because at that point, I've had a buddy who told me he just squeezes his kid between his legs just so he doesn't move, because you almost never see that head poke up, but then all of a sudden when he sees coast is clear, he'll just crest up and he's coming in hard. So, I mean, jakes a lot of times will just plow right in, but usually, seasoned gobblers, they're really scouting it. Like coyotes circle you, coyotes will almost always circle you, come down, so you're downwind. And it's just kind of something they do. That's their defense mechanism for all this, because they're very vulnerable on the ground in this time of year. So they're also all horned up, so they take the risk.
Well, I think that's a pretty good overview. Is there anything else you wanted to mention we haven't touched on?
No, I'm done sweating in that. No. I mean, I just want to reiterate is, just be as mobile as possible. Get confident as you can with the calls that you're able to work. Get out there and give it a try. Get out there in the evenings first. See if you can get them to gobble. Use the owl call first, before you start using any other call. Start softly, work your way up. If there's nothing close, work your way up. You might get a little further one. And once you get them gobbling, space your calls out. Pace yourself, because a lot of times, even me, I get excited. And as soon as I hear a gobble or double gobble, I want to hammer right back. And, the old timers always used to tell me, like, that's a guy, and they would hammer right back with calls, or you hear another hen call and it's just constantly answering immediately after. That's just not nature. There's always gobblers that pause, and then other times they'll shut up completely, and that's where a real gamble comes in, because you have to decide whether you're going to sit it out or just get up, abandon it, cut out of there, and try to come back in another day, because you don't want to go traipsing in if they completely shut up, because they're either coming straight in at you and they're just cautious, or they found a hen, because you're making a lot of noise. You're calling, he's calling. Other hens around, they might come in. I've seen it happen in front of me where I've had a gobbler coming in. Hen comes from across the field. doesn't say a word. They gang up and take off, and he's gone. They'll mate, and he's not ready to go for another hour or two. That's why it's always usually good first thing in the morning, and then it kind of lulls mid-morning, then late morning push until noon, which we can only hunt till noon here the first couple weeks.
Do you sit there and watch them mate, or you go try and find another bird when that's going on?
The peeping Tom and me, I have to scramble for my binoculars. I usually army crawl up, and I get my ghillie suit out. You never want to be busted being a perv, but it's nature, so you got to really visualize it to become one with nature. So it's an important part of the whole process.
Leave the gun behind the tree and take the camera with you. I understand.
You need a gun. Just camera, binoculars, ghillie suit. That's
you still consider that a successful hunt.
This is why Doug and I aren't allowed on our hometown street anymore. We got used to our ghillie suits. I mean, get out there. That's what I want to say. Even as far as us as a collective, I was a big turkey hunter in my teens, throughout college, but it just lulls off. Spring's a busy time. Like, we're a big baseball family, big baseball, softball family, so it's a tough time of year. But take a day or two. You can only hunt a half day, so if you can rearrange your schedule around that, just get out there. It's a great time to be in the woods. It's a great time to scout for anything. I never wrap it up.
But you're itching.
Nah. But it's just, back in the day, Doug, you probably remember this. We would hunt in the morning, pack a fishing pole, collapsible one or whatever, and fish the rest of the way. So we would we'd cover miles. It's a good way to stay in shape. And then we would get out there, look for turkeys all day long if we couldn't find one or put one to bed, and then fish our way home. It's just a beautiful time of year. It just, in another couple of weeks, everything will be so green and thick, it's just hard to get around out there. Right now is that buffer zone between winter and spring where you can still, everything's visible and not too thick and nasty, and buggy. This is a good time of year to be out there.
We appreciate it, sir. Thanks for the knowledge.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I just wanted to jump in real quick, too. So we do have our shop up on our website, www.publiclandsavages.com. So feel free to stop by, check it out. We got some great shirts up. We got some coffee cups, some phone cases, some funny stuff. So, check it out. Have fun with it. Thank you for your support. We are adding shirts daily almost, or at least weekly, I should say. But yeah, check it out. We'll stay tuned and more to come.
Yeah, just one last final note. We got episode 3 coming out May 8th, and we're going to be talking some fishing at that point. So something a little different for anyone that might want to hear something other than hunting for once. So talk to you guys then.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.
Yes, please boost those social numbers for us. Thank you.
Absolutely.